Hello, folks, friends, neighbors. Welcome to United. My name is Jennifer Oz Freeman. I'm the Associate Professor and Program Director for Theology and the Arts. And it's my pleasure to have with us tonight Tyrone Fowlkes, who's one of our DMin students extraordinaire in theology and the arts, and also a reverend in the Episcopal Church. And when he's finished with our program, will be a Reverend Doctor. And he is the curator of the exhibit Mementos of Failure that we're here to reflect on tonight. And we're joined by a couple of our contributors, which we'll come to in a little bit with some of the conversation. As you'll hear and see, Tyrone has a background in the arts as well. And we're really grateful to have his guidance on this project. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to him to give us some little bit of framing, and then we'll move to panel and larger conversation, right? All right, so join me in thanking Tyrone.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello. It's good to be here with you. And thank you, Dr. Oz Freeman, for the invitation to curate the exhibition and to share some thoughts that have been kind of on my mind for quite a while. It's good to see you. It's a rainy night outside, it's kind of cold. And I wasn't for sure exactly what to expect in terms of tonight, but it's good to be here. This is only my second time here at United, at least physically. I've been a DMin student for about 4 years now, all virtual. But I've had the pleasure of coming to the campus once last year for a conference that I was actually attending on preaching in Minneapolis and swung by the seminary. But this is only my second time, and it's good to be here in this space, to be here in this chapel as well. So I'm going to start with the first slide, which is, and thank you, Jennifer, for being the kind of tech person. You hear me say, next slide from time to time. So I want to start here. This cup, and the cup is here, in the stone, as it were. But the cup was given to me in Philadelphia in the fall of 2022 by someone I had been dating. It says, hello, fall. Hello, fall, the very best time of all. We had been dating for just a short time. And, he gives me this cup. And so it's one of those kind of early gifts where you're kind of feeling out the kind of person, trying to get a sense of what they like and don't like, what their peeves are and what you're willing to kind of put up with. Clearly, he didn't know that I actually hate cups, coffee mugs with writing on the side, especially pithy writings, pithy sayings. But we live and learn, I guess. And I've held on to this cup for some time. I've come across it a couple of times in just some moving and packing of stuff. And when I made my latest move from Philadelphia to Chicago, which is where I live currently, I came across the cup again, right? So just to fill you in on just a little bit, I lived in Philadelphia for about 18 months. And I went there to take a job at one of our Episcopal cathedrals. And I will say that, during that 18 months, I met some really beautiful people, had some really good experiences. But, for the most part, my time in Philly was difficult. It was a challenging time. I found Philly to be a challenging city, a very rough city, a raw city, and a hard city. And toward the end of my time there, I was, hit with a termination from my job. And it was a wrongful termination, I contend, but it was a termination nonetheless. And it left me with a whole bunch of stuff. And so as I was kind of making my way kind of out of Philly and kind of had discerned that it was really time for me to go and to return to Chicago, I met the gentleman who gave me the cup, right? We had a very difficult encounter and it was actually quite hostile at the end. And so the cup comes to represent a kind of memento for me, a kind of a memento of failure. And it reminds me of, I think, the difficulty in a lot of failures in life, right? A lot of poor relationships that we have, a lot of poor outcomes, a lot of personal challenges that are kind of thrown our way. It reminds me of just how things go wrong, you know, of how things are kind of put upon us in ways that we don't really want them to, and also in ways that we don't really deserve, but they happen nonetheless. And it's clear to me, as I'm sure it's probably clear to you, that we don't always get, you know, our just desserts, right? We don't always get what we deserve. And that's just, you know, how life is. In the next slide, I brought another memento for you. This is the sticker that I received when I voted. Normally I throw these away. Just as I don't like, you know, coffee mugs with writings on them, I don't really like, you know, sticking things on my body with writing, you know, so unless it's like just a name tag or something like that. But I decided to kind of keep this memento because, I mean, I suspect, like many of you, will be kind of processing and digesting, and as we say in the Episcopal Church, inwardly digesting what happened last week, right? I mean, just, you know, what happened. And what it really does mean for us, for so many of us who live life on the margins, right? And perhaps in 10 or 20 or 30 years, I'll be, you know, going through some boxes and, you know, rifling through some stuff, and I'll come across this sticker again. And perhaps I'll, you know, it'll mean something a little different to me. Perhaps things will be a bit more clearer for me, but, you know, we'll just kind of see, you know, what will happen, right? In the next slide, I want to just talk a little bit about the exhibition and kind of what kind of motivated this exhibition. It's a second iteration for me. I did a Mementos of Failure exhibition 20 years ago. This was in 2023. I had started my Master of Arts Management at Columbia College in Chicago. And we were tasked with putting on an exhibition. And I came up with this idea of, well, what would it be like to kind of reflect on our failures, our shortcomings, all the things we kind of sweep under the rug, and in recognition that, you know, what we can deem a failure can have kind of many faces. It's often, you know, things that we kind of, you know, hide, and or things we lose, or things that represent some kind of loss for us. Things done and left undone. It occurred to me that our lives are kind of chock full of failures, of kind of unrealized dreams, of unfinished projects, of unfulfilled fantasies and desires. There are all sorts of things that we never kind of get around to doing, things that we never kind of get around to saying. There are also reminders of where we screwed up, or how something or some situation was screwed up for us. They are kind of what's left over after our plans fail. And we all have plans, right? We all have plans. I think of the parable that Jesus tells about the wealthy man who goes off on a journey And before he goes, he calls his slaves, his workers, together and issues to them talents, right? To one, he issues 5 talents. To another, he issues 2. To another, he issues 1 talent. And those that receive the 5 and the 2 talents, they go and invest. If you recall with the story, they go and invest those talents and then make a return on their investment, and they offer that back to the wealthy man. The one who received 1 talent, he does what? He what? Yeah, he buries it. He buries it. And he is the one who often gets a bad rap when preachers start, working their, homiletical tricks and kind of during the exegesis. And but he does what many of us, I think, are inclined to do, and that is, to kind of put things away, right? Wouldn't it be nice sometimes to just be able to kind of put things away, to push them to the back and to not have to kind of deal with it, to bury it, right? To bury it essentially. And this exhibition starts with just that, those things that we kind of push to the back, in our closets, in our storage bins, in our trunks, in those old shoe boxes, and those things that kind of lurk underneath piles of stuff on our desk, right? All these are kind of mementos of failure. And it's convenient, I suspect, for all of us to put things away, to bury them for a while until we have enough, really, within our own selves to kind of face it, to kind of come to terms with it. Because it, whatever it is, has attached itself to us in some way. And so we don't really want to throw it away. We don't really throw it away, right? We just kind of put it away, right? The letter, the item, the nasty note, right? The memo that someone issued, the photo, right? All that kind of potent stuff. There's something kind of hidden in there, right? And for me, I think there's something, worth exploring, some layers that kind of need to be peeled back. So I really kind of want to kind of create a space in which, we can do some kind of peeling back. And so your peeling back, I think, is very different from my peeling back. But there were some brave and courageous and wonderful artists and contributors to the exhibition who were willing to be vulnerable and kind of open up their own lives and tell a bit of their own story about, what has come to kind of constitute a failure in their lives. So I think I want to kind of find meaning in failure. I want to, and if not, still be willing to maybe find some reconciliation and some hope down the line. But that comes in time, right? And so, so think about it. I mean, think about all the things that we, have kind of buried, we've kind of put away, shoved away, pushed away, thrown in a bin, just to not have to kind of deal with it. In the next slide, The Emerging Green Man by Justin Saviatanis, professor here at United. And he says that this piece was started a couple of years ago, and not long after that, his art table became a desk that became cluttered with all kinds of stuff. The piece is in the exhibition, and if you look really closely at the piece, you can actually see the tracings, the lines where ultimately the medium will go, but you can kind of see where this is kind of headed. A theme that comes up a lot, I think, in this kind of Mementos of Failure exhibition is things kind of left undone, right? I'm an Episcopal priest and have made friends with the prayer book, and in one of our prayers of confession, it calls us to kind of seek forgiveness of things known and unknown, and things done and left undone, right? And so this theme kind of has resonated with me often. You know, things left undone, things left undone. I mean, think about that. You know, things left unsaid, things left unspoken, things that were not worked through. Even in relationships, some places I really wanted to go in some of my relationships, personal relationships, and even romantic relationships. You know, but I couldn't because something had happened to the person, or something had happened to the two of us, or something had happened to me or within me. We all have things that are done and things that are left undone. And even though we may find the impetus to return to something and try to complete it later, sometimes we don't always get that opportunity, right? We don't always get that opportunity. It's too late. We lost time. We don't always get the opportunity to kind of say what we should have said, or done what we should have done, right? In the next slide, I want to say that this was an interesting piece. Tina Krog, chapter 37, and she talks about the realities of, the difficult realities of childbirth and miscarriage, right? And I spent this afternoon with a very dear friend who is the daughter of my best friend, Nelia, who is 46. I'm best friends with her father. His father is 80, in his 80s. And but Nelia and I have also kind of formed our own kind of friendship, separate of her dad. And Nelia is I recall over lunch with her the difficult conversations we had over lunch several years ago, in which she and her husband were trying to get pregnant. And I remember sitting at a French cafe in Chicago, and she was just in tears. Now she was able to get pregnant. She and her husband were able to get pregnant, but she ended up having some difficulties within her marriage. And so the marriage is kind of dissolving now with 2 children, right? Which is the kind of beautiful part about the marriage, I guess. One of the beautiful parts about the marriage. And more recently, she's been diagnosed with breast cancer, and has more recently undergone a double mastectomy, right? And so when I saw her this afternoon, she's a very beautiful woman, actually. Of course, she's quite self-conscious about her looks, which have changed drastically. But she says she kind of pulls her sweater kind of tight closer to her chest, and she says, "Oh, look, I don't have any breasts; they're gone." Right? And I was like, "Whoa." But we went on to kind of talk about what she has had to do, I think, in terms of contending and reconciling with all of this, the more difficult aspects of her life right now, not just the cancer, but the dissolution of her marriage, and what it means for her to now be a single mom trying to raise 2 little girls that she really struggled to even have, right? This theme of loss, things we lose, comes up, and it comes up at multiple points in our lives, and it comes up in multiple points in the exhibition, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, when we have some more conversation, and kind of, what the impact of that is, what the meaning of that is, and how to kind of work through that. In the next slide, though, Night Creatures, February 2023, Elliot Barnhill. He's with us, and we'll talk more about this piece a little later, but part of the backdrop of this piece is about Elliot's own struggle with chronic illness and the struggle of navigating through the healthcare system. And I began to paint a theme that shows up in a couple of other pieces within the exhibition, and that is this idea of how our own failures can be the byproduct of kind of larger institutional failures and larger kind of organizational and structural failures, right? I was, just a personal note here, another personal note, I was struck in the past week by three events that involved churches. So my polling place was literally right across the street from me at a church called Commonwealth Community Church. And so I go in to cast my vote, and there's a woman who is clearly having some kind of difficulties staying conscious, and she's kind of passing in and out and that kind of thing, and so that we're kind of dealing with that emergency. The poll workers, one had tremendous struggle in terms of punching my name. I had to kind of tell my name to him like 7, 8 times. They ran out of pens, those little pens that you kind of fill out the ballots with. And it was all kind of strange, foreboding. You can always tell when in many churches, when time just kind of stops, right? Because you kind of look on the bulletin board and you see, notices, right? Announcements, flyers, with dates like from a decade ago, right? And it's like, the fish fry at, 7 o'clock, February, 17th, 1993 or something like that, right? So, and I have to say, I thought for a moment, to what degree I should really kind of report some of the stuff around. I mean, and by the way, the clock, and I'm looking at this clock here, by the way, which says 8:27, but it's actually not 8:27, it's 7:27. So at the church, so this was just the Wednesday past, the Sunday, which we were to change our clocks, right? And so the clock wasn't changed. And so they were planning to kind of leave and shut down the polling place like an hour earlier. It's like, what? It's like, no, this is not going to work. And but I began thinking in a strange way, I hope these are not omens, right? I hope these are not omens. Turns out, they were omens, right? The next day, I participated in a closing service of a congregation that I had pastored several years ago, actually before I left Chicago in 2013, the first time. And I had worked with this congregation for quite a while. And after, the membership decline, that just kept, declining, they ended up closing, right? So I think they were down to maybe 4 or 5 active members, most of whom were in their 80s at that point. And, I thought to myself, the kind of tragedy of, this kind of closing, because it really, this is a small Episcopal parish, and it is a parish, by the way. I mean, just for those of you who understand something about the Episcopal Church, it's not a mission. What we call a mission, it's not being subsidized by the diocese. It was actually a self-supportive parish, and in a neighborhood, that was, still had quite a bit of life in it, but a life in the neighborhood which did not extend at all to the church, right? And so, and that just kind of built up, and the place closed. And I thought, well, what could have happened? What should have happened within the diocese, within the leadership of the church, within the relationships that they may or may not have had with other Episcopal congregations and even other communities of faith within the neighborhood, but, all that is kind of water under the bridge at this point because the church closed, right? And of course, the third church-related event, another kind of tragedy, is the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury, which is the spiritual head of the Anglican Communion, of which the Episcopal Church is the kind of U.S. American expression of the Anglican Communion. And so the Archbishop of Canterbury resigns because of his failure to deal forthrightly, frankly, with a known abuser. And who went, this is pretty hardcore stuff. I mean, a history of abuse by someone who, well, John Smythe is his name. He was a lawyer who was in charge of some of the camps within parts of the UK, and also some of the missional aspects of the camps, which extended to places like Africa, parts of Zimbabwe, and so on and so forth. And so, but a pretty brutal, legacy of abuse. And of course, the abuser dies, right? He died, I think, in 2018. And the Archbishop knew about this a decade ago and failed to do much of anything. So, I say all this to say that, there are always kind of things overarching, right? Our failures, structures, organizations, institutional dynamics that trickle down, right? They kind of trickle down. And so in an interesting way, in the next couple of slides, there were a whole host of notices, letters, some of which I'm showing you came from the previous iteration, but some are from this current iteration of the exhibition. Plate suspension, report cards that showed bad grades. A rejection letter comes up a lot in these. Our own Professor DMin Wheeler, his rejection letter from not preaching, but a professorship he wanted. Our own Barry Lawson, who's here. We'll talk a little bit more about this piece as well, but his transcript from UCLA. Our own Jennifer Oz Freeman, comments from a submission that she made. And so this piece, if you can stop here, this piece was actually made by a friend of mine, and this piece was actually in the earlier iteration. Gary Magruder, who wanted to kind of take stock of his own failures. And so the edges are kind of, his kind of failures, courtesy with security, humility under scrutiny, self-knowledge amid merit. And kind of down the center are these kinds of lessons about failures. For example, from Robert Browning in Last Ride Together, fail I alone in words and deeds, why all men strive and who succeeds. From a small boy seeing giants, there is much to be said about failure. It is much more interesting than success. From the book of Ecclesiastes, woe to him that is alone when he fails, for he hath not another to help him up. And from Rosalind Russell, the 1957 interview that she did with New York Herald Tribune. Flops are a part of life's menu, and I'm a girl who never missed out on any of its courses. In the next slide, I want you to think about a couple questions. What is a failure that you still think about? So what is a failure that you still think about? And can you find meaning in that failure? And are you willing to fail? Are you willing to fail again? We came across, and I will say I want to thank Professor Oz Freeman for this. We came across a short video from William Defoe in the next slide, where he talks a little bit about, trying to fail, as it were. And I think we have a clip as well. So, and she's going to work some techno magic for us. Stand by.
This idea of trying to fail.
What do you mean?
Just think about that. Try to make a bad painting. Try to act badly. Try to be lousy in that scene. It's interesting. It kind of puts the idea of striving for perfection on, it does something. You've got to find ways to let you not worry and be free, That's all. Once again, we're talking triggers, If you're content to fail, or you accept it somewhere. And I only mention this because you talk about being hard on yourself, because the idea of being hard on yourself is kicking yourself for not doing better, not doing better, not doing better. So you got to deal with this striving impulse, which can hurt you. You need enough to get you in movement and get you trying things, but you don't need so much that it suffocates you, that you're uptight. So I'm just saying, sometimes I flirt with ideas of fucking things up or not being hard on myself, or, Well, also you put yourself in situations where you can't control things. And that's why, people say, that's so risky. It's only risky if it's not risky, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's only risky if it's not risky, meaning...
If it's a real risk, you're trying something.
Right.
Something will happen. Something will be learned.
Something will be learned. It's only risky if it's not risky. In the next slide is a quote from Steely. Okay, hold on here. There we go. Some of you may be familiar with this. In fact, I know some of you are, actually. From Steely Dan's hit Deacon Blues way back in the 70s. That line, learn to work the saxophone, I play just what I feel, drink Scotch whiskey all night long and die behind the wheel. They got a name for the winners in the world, and I want a name when I lose. They call Alabama the Crimson Tide. Just call me Deacon Blues. Call me Deacon Blues. This was kind of the backdrop of the first Mementos of Failure iteration. And so in many ways, I kind of want to hold this together with the William Defoe clip in our discussion, just a quick minute here. So in the next slide, which I think is just some closing thoughts here. You probably have heard of Richard Rohr, who is a priest and contemplative, and is the founder of the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Years ago, he wrote a book titled Falling Upward, in which he discusses how to live spiritually within the kind of two halves of our lives. And he says that those who have fallen or failed at something or have gone down are the only ones who know what it means really to be up. Most of us think about the second half of our lives as those first steps into those autumn years. We're clear that there are fewer days ahead than there are behind, and we have to start contending with changes in our bodies, increasing health concerns, and what it means to start letting things go. Letting people go in our lives, letting go of dreams, letting go of things that we won't succeed at, letting go of things that we never really quite accomplished, letting go of those things that we just know kind of by now will never come to fruition, right? But Rohr pushes back on all this and says that the second half of our lives is also a time of not counting losses, but counting gains. And that it is possible to come into one's fullness later in life, but this comes by acknowledging that we can actually grow spiritually by failing, by doing wrong, then by doing right, by being willing to make mistakes. So in curating this exhibition, I suspect I may do it a couple more times in my life. I find that our entire lives can become a kind of a curatorial exercise. We're always pushing things backward and pulling things forward when we're actually kind of ready to actually deal with them. At times, we really do need to push things back, though, right? Sometimes we really do need to bury certain things. And it's okay if that's how we have to kind of deal with it in that moment. But at other times, life refuses to be controlled, and we have to deal with what has come forward, what has been brought forward, what has been revealed. And we have to kind of work with that, right? I think there's an art in knowing, really, when we can do that, when we should do that, when we should push back, when we should let things go, when we should pull things forward. And that art, the art of the matter, shall we say, is something I'm continuing to kind of work with, even now. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the artists who contributed work. Thank you for those of you who joined us online as well. And so we'll see where this conversation takes us. I believe there's going to be a some more I think there's any more technical stuff, but I think there's going to be some conversation. Move over where? Here? Okay, there.
Oh, are they? Yeah. If I could- Okay.
Oh. So Elliot Barnhill and Ray Lawson had works in the exhibition. Do I need the mic or no?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We're doing some stuff here. Okay. 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 And you're going to join us as well, Dr. Wallace Friedman. Okay.
Are you gonna sit down or you stand there?
I think I'll stand.
Okay.
No, I think I'll sit down.
You're gonna sit down? Okay.
Change my mind just that quick.
Okay, got it.
So.
Very well, you pass the mic over, and I'm gonna correct our.
It turns out that fall is really not the best time of all, by the way. I'm looking at this cup. And I want to say that, if there's someone who would like the cup, who's really kind of into coffee mugs with writing on them, then please feel free to take that. I won't be taking it at home. It's actually, I'm kind of done with it. I no longer need it to be a memento of mine, but if you would like it, then please feel free to grab it. So this is just kind of a conversation, and we'll kind of just open it up. So you're part of this conversation as well. The question I think I would have for all the artists, and when I say artists, I really just think that you see yourselves as artists, right? I mean, contributors, artists, contributors. You did some art, in this sense. Kind of what compelled you, right, to contribute, right, to the exhibition? I mean, what was in your mind as you kind of saw the invitation, and what compelled you to kind of be a part of it? So we're going to start with, how about we start with
Me?
Yeah.
I'm holding the microphone. What compelled me? Well, I was compelled before we, put out the call, because I actually forget how it came up in conversation, but somehow we were talking about something else. And you mentioned that you had, what things? You could do. Hit the little CC button in the bottom left. If you're trying to stop then oh boy, just help him, Grace. The nice thing about having an event on failure is that it doesn't matter what happens because everything is a part of it. It really
Absolutely.
has been liberating
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Yeah.
every step of the way. I'm like, oh, it's fine. It's on brand, all part of it. No, but I don't remember what we were talking about, but you somehow mentioned in passing this exhibit that you had curated on failure. And I was like, tell me more. I need to know more about this failure exhibit. Sounded incredible.
Yeah.
So I just very much resonated, with that idea. And as somebody who has maybe some curatorial tendencies in the way that you described just now, which I quite liked. I prefer to think of it like that instead of hoarding, but yeah, you could go kind of either way. I think curatorial sounds more intentional and therapeutic. Yeah, so I was really energized by that. And then you very graciously in your own time of, moving across country and major transition agreed to do this work, which I'm really thankful for. I think that's the first question.
Sure. Yeah. What do you think?
So here's what happened. There was an initial email in the Monday morning, which I ignored. Then I ignored basically every single other reminder of this exhibition thing until finally it was on Facebook. It was like, fine. So then, but because I'd ignored it because I was like, well, I don't have anything that vaguely relates to failure or loss or misery. You didn't say misery, but I associate my thing with misery. And because I had totally blocked out the fact that I have like 100 things that look basically exactly like that at home right now. I just have stacks of random crap and it all looks, well, not all of it. It looks very different from each other, but a lot of them look like that because I made a million things in that time of my life. And I was like, you might as well, put it to some use. So it's not just in a drawer. Yeah.
Yeah. So Barry, talk a little bit about your piece that you submitted, and just so folks have a clear sense of what it was, and it was the transcript, but just tell us about the background of that and what compelled you to be a part of it.
Well, it's really just an artifact. I printed it out and crossed out my student number and sent it to you. But so I don't really claim to be an artist in this, at least in this instance, but it's something that's coming up again because I never really let go of the experience for better or worse. And I'm applying to PhD programs again at the age of 44, which, may be a good or a bad thing. We'll see. But so it's this transcript from my first stint in graduate school right out of undergrad. And I guess I submitted it as a sort of hope for catharsis over it having fallen apart. And so what happened is I applied to graduate school as a senior in college, and I got in at UCLA and I got in at the University of British Columbia, and neither one was funded. And I thought, well, I can go to UBC, which is a fine institution, or I can go to UCLA, which is the number 5 program in the country and one of the best in the world. And so I went, and it didn't work out very well. I was not funded, so I was looking for work every term. And I had personality conflicts with the professors there. They weren't really invested in working with me as an unfunded student, and my master's paper never got off the ground, and I just ended up kind of walking away after almost 2 years without a degree. I moved back here and then ended up doing a master's in urban planning, and then about 10 years later, a master's here in religion and theology. I've tried other things, and just nothing other than the ivory tower really gets me going. So here I am.
I think it's interesting to kind of look back, I think, on kind of your life, and particularly those of us who've kind of followed trajectories, and traditional trajectories, right? Whether it's in our vocation, in my case, priesthood, right? And getting ordained and becoming what we call in our church a rector, which is like a senior minister, I think, in most congregations, and then becoming a canon of a cathedral, and then maybe one day becoming a dean or maybe a bishop, and I think to look back, I think, and to see kind of, I think the difficulty, in kind of navigating all that kind of is taken to kind of get there, right? I mean, and the ordination process alone, in the Episcopal Church is like 93 steps, and which can take anywhere from 4 to 6 years to complete. And then when you get ordained, you have to then navigate, finding positions and that kind of thing, and you are then exposed to kind of everything that is kind of there, right? In terms of the institution, dealing with structure, dealing with hierarchies, dealing with personalities, right? And I think, and it's sort of funny because I looked at my master's degree when I did my MDiv like 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago. I started my MDiv almost 30 years ago. And I was 25, and I know I don't look 54, right? I know I don't look 54, but I really am 54. And I was young and immature, probably way too immature to be starting an MDiv program, right? And I happened to come across my MDiv transcript, and I saw some really bad, horrible stuff, right? And yet, I think there is something to because so much of our lives, I would imagine, are so connected to institutions, right? How we work through our own kind of personal aspirations and dreams alongside the pressures and the structures themselves, which can sometimes be in conflict. And kind of what do you kind of do with that? But what did you learn? What did you learn in this process?
Yeah.
Just and putting and kind of putting it out there, kind of a bit of your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little about just so.
Well, and I just realized I didn't say what I submitted. Yeah. I submitted 2 things because I'm really good at failure. And I thought, no, I submitted, I think 2 things because one was kind of personal and maybe one was more professional. And because we're at the seminary and I'm in a teaching role, I thought a little bit of both would maybe be a good contribution. Yeah. So I submitted my ukulele because I learned how to play the ukulele during the pandemic, and it was very cathartic and comforting. And then I stopped playing it over the last couple of years. And so now it kind of sits there as a reminder to me, in this way, like, as I wrote in my label, it's also kind of symbolic of all the many things like that I wish I could spend my time doing, but don't do, or kind of impulsive hobbies that I attempt, but then discard, or things like that. So it's not just an unplayed ukulele, it's much more than that. And then the other one is a professional memento, which is a rejection letter for an article that I submitted to a top medieval studies journal, the top arguably medieval studies journal in the United States, Speculum. I submitted an article for publication right after college, right after my PhD. And I did know when I submitted it, it was a little bit rushed and I should have spent more time on it, but even before pulling out the rejection letter for this exhibit, I have had the first line of the rejection letter memorized since the moment I got it, which is basically, while there may be a germ of an idea here, this article attempts to do these three things and does none of them successfully.
Yeah.
And it really, it cut deep.
Yeah.
And I had just finished my PhD, which was a big accomplishment for me, with the family and all those kinds of things. And so it kind of like just had the effect of deflating the balloon, which in a way, and then the person is, I posted the whole letter, all the feedback, it's anonymous, and it's always reader one. So I've put for your amusement all of the very detailed, exhaustive, line by line feedback that reviewer gave me, which actually I was grateful for, because if you're going to really cut to the chase like that, it's helpful to follow through with like how you could make the article better. Ironically, I realized immediately that the reviewer was right, and I was trying to do too many things in a single article. I'd gotten excited about the subject matter and basically tried to cram 3 arguments into one essay. So actually I ended up just kind of scrapping the whole thing and starting over. So their feedback, I didn't use it because I changed the article so much because of their anyway. So those are the things that I submitted. And it was for me a little bit like Barry too, I think, like hoping to have a cathartic movement of that, because I have it memorized, that rejection letter remains fresh. It's kind of like a symbolic of the academic imposter syndrome that many people carry. And is it like, can I write a good paper? I mean, I've now published a couple of books and other articles, so like, I guess I can, but that line is still like right under the surface. I can pull that up at any time.
Right.
And it's like embarrassing,
Sure, yeah.
And so to be able to like highlight it and put it in the gallery, like anybody can look at it. My students come and look at my rejection letter, and I hope it normalizes for other people rejection, and that you can move past it and learn from it and like that. The ukulele, actually not being able to play it now makes me want to play it. So
Yeah.
follow up with me later on that one. But
Yeah.
so I think I've learned just like actually that line from Ecclesiastes that your friend had put in there, that really that to have someone with you when you fail so that there's somebody to pull you back up. So I guess it articulates nicely the role that community can have in like moving through failure and processing it. So
Elliot, what do you think? What did you learn?
What did I learn?
And just to maybe fill in about a description about your piece as well, Night Creatures.
Yeah. So basically the background is in between, let's say, December of 2022 and let's say April 2023, worst months of my life. Horrible, horrible, horrible time, because my physical health totally just crashed and burned. And so as a result, every single evening I was up at night, late into the night, couldn't sleep, too much pain, losing my mind. So I just spent like hours every single night doing one of two things, either drawing gruesome saint martyrdom scenes or or drawing weird creatures. And so the thing I submitted for this exhibition is one of the creatures pieces. And all of these images that I still have today, I don't know what to do with them, to be honest. Like all this art that like I don't want to get rid of, but also like it's sad to look at, so I don't look at it. So this was an interesting experience, because it kind of forced me to like look at this stuff that I just don't look at but don't want to get rid of. Like I don't want to admit to this like time in my life that just I mean, I wasn't doing things very well. Like I wasn't doing things well. It was like a total, I mean, it's not the medical system's fault, although it kind of is, because they were not doing things right. But I was also failing to like go to my appointments because they were not listening to me. So it was like this horrible repeating cycle. So Yeah, so it's been good to like think about the purpose of failure, think about like what do we learn when things go wrong and things go off the rails a little bit. Um, I don't know exactly what I've learned other than, a bit more self-sufficiency, I suppose. Um, but yeah, it's been good to reflect.
Thank you, thank you. I'm just, I'm mindful of the time, and I will say it is actually turning 8, and not 9, but it's still late nonetheless, getting late on a Wednesday night. And I want to just open this up and ask kind of what questions do you have for any of us? And that goes for those of you who are joining us online as well.
I should also say Dr. Sabiatanis is also in the audience and contributed something.
Yes.
If you'd like to say anything about yours. Not to put you on the spot.
That's true. Yeah, it was interesting for me to submit something, well, to feel the intent. You talked about with your ukulele wanting to play it again, because the intensity now of wanting to finish that piece is really strong every time I walk by it. I'm like, can I fail at the failure exhibition by taking it down so I can finish it? So I thought about that. But the interesting thing, after we had the first conversation, the arts lunch, I guess when we did this, I realized there was something I wish I put in instead, which was I have a little stuffed horse that I received in my Easter basket when I was a little kid. And I loved it so much the very first day I got it that its mane fell out. And I thought, I was a terrible child because I'd played with it wrong, because I'd broken it on the first day that I got it. And I still have it. I realize I'm holding on to it and holding on to that sense of like, and like, what a lovely thing, a child who loves a toy they got so much on the first day they played with it that much. But I didn't have the capacity as a little kid to think about like the intensity of that kind of love. So when you talk about what you learned, like this exhibition made me think both like, why didn't I include that? And why am I still carrying it around? And also like the ability, like what did I learn? Like it made me rethink the ability to forgive that little kid for like just being like so into a toy that I got that was so lovely. And I was a total horse kid. Like, that it was so beautiful. And it wasn't my fault that I broke it. It was my parents gave me a fragile thing when I was a little kid. And so, yeah, so I've been thinking a lot actually about like, what does it mean to like be able to look at those failures from a different lens and really be able to like, I could actually rejoice a little in that little kid instead of feeling like that kid is a failure. Like,
Right. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I thought it was a failure, but it's because I didn't know better at that
Right.
age. And so, yeah, so I really appreciate what you've done here with this exhibition and the ability to sort of think about how do we think about what's called failure from these multiple lenses.
No, comment or question? Okay,
Oh.
go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm Henry. What I really liked actually was the notion of something that's undone, but isn't necessarily a failure. I've developed a rather odd hobby later in life. I make upcycle lamps, and I am a very linear thinker. I'm very much like, you do this, that you have a list, you get it done. But when it comes to making a lamp out of random things that you find, nothing can be linear. And so there's a lot of half-built lamps in our basement. But it's a freedom I never experienced before. The freedom of that is undone, but I'll come back to it. And maybe I'll have a new idea with it and it'll go somewhere different. And there's a joy to that.
Yeah.
So I like the concept of undone, but not necessarily unfulfilled. So something just that's what popped into my head.
Thank you. There are always a host of unrealized dreams, things undone, unfinished projects. I have a whole slew of them actually, which, I have these kind of wonderful ideas which I can kind of craft, and, I think it's building a much larger kind of mosaic, but I don't know yet. There's you know?
nothing like wiring a lamp,
Right,
plugging it in,
right,
having it not light up.
right. This is very true. Very true. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Well, there's plenty of refreshments. There's
Yes.
some snacks, there's some wine, there's some all sorts of wonderful things. And so let's enjoy those. Again, thank you for all of you who contributed work to the exhibition and for your contributions. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Tyrone. Thank you, folks on Zoom. Good night.
It's just. In some direction. Right.
Good to meet you. I remember hearing one of them.
I was looking at Reedy's hair and I was like, that was like. Oh, it's just as far. I know. It's what I heard more about it. Oh, I mean, that's. Nice. Kind of down towards the bottom. Sure. Of course. Yep, there's like. Yeah. Right, right. Yeah. Yeah. I'll be right down. Thank you. Thank you so much.